The One Ring is being played in 45% of decks in Modern right now at approximately, a 3.7 copy average in these decks. It's probably being brought down by like the Karn Wish boards, honestly. It's being essentially a playset copy across your 75, let's be honest here. But if you can somehow reason with me as to why you're playing less than 4, I'd love to hear your excuse, because Lord knows I know you're not right. But when it comes to the most played cards in Modern, it's interesting to see that it's not only just about the energy package being up there and the One Ring. It goes to show how much Modern has really evolved in terms of the cards that are valuable now. What are the cards being answered? And in many ways, it's starting to seem like the Eternal formats. It's starting to look like the legacy metagame in certain ways. And I want to kind of break that down today. How, the success of the implementation of the energy package, as well as the overrunning of Orcish Bowmasters in response to the One Ring, which is the best artifact in Modern right now, alongside the Modern Horizon sets, have all come together to create a format that is near unrecognizable to one that many of us would be playing, heck, even 5 years ago. And when it comes to a metagame like this, it really starts with the discussion of like the recency issue, right? Like, we have Modern Horizons 3 that has come about recently and upturned the metagame recently, but Modern is a format of more than 10 years worth of cards in it. It's crazy to think that a set like this can be changing so much of the format that we love, but I mean, we shouldn't be surprised considering the impact of Modern Horizons 1 and 2, but with the power that Modern Horizons 2 had, it's almost surprising that Modern Horizons 1 largely is like forgotten. Like, what's the most played Modern Horizons 1 card that you can think of? Just let me know in the comment section down below if y'all can, because I think at this point everyone can just name all the Modern Horizons 2 elementals, and 3 we got some pieces here and there, or you're just thinking of Nadu. But when it comes to those bans, Nadu's gone, so great. We have another Simic legendary taken out. Uro and Oko have had to pay for those sins as well, but truly Nadu's kind of like the goofy triplet of those 3. But Grief has been the more recent discussion as well. As its namesake mentions, it's one that's been harassing this format in just waves. I mean, it's defined whole archetypes themselves, although some folks would argue that the mono black archetype is arguably more consistent, just better, not having to rely on these like double Grief hands or just Grief in terms of interaction. The Necro Dominance decks can do what they need to do, because honestly at this point I don't see them competing with Energy, because at Energy being the top deck in the format, I mean, look, 25 to 30% of the metagame right now is just Energy. Jeskai Control counts because it uses the energy package as well. And I mean, something like Galvanic Discharge is the 4th most played card in Modern as a removal spell. The energy package is absolutely insane. I mean, let's come back to those numbers in a second, noting that the aggro energy decks account for over 20% of the metagame right now, with Mardu aggro being the kind of de facto pick, as it seems. It seems to have a bit more consistency, with Orcish Bowmasters being able to stop like the hard draws. You have Thoughtseize and a form of interaction as well, but ultimately the Boros version being that aggressive front, taking advantage of the One Ring. So if it doesn't have Orcish Bowmasters, it has the card that Orcish Bowmasters is ultimately trying to stop. But when it comes to those percentages, it's really weird to think that we had this great introduction in terms of a card like Unholy Heat into the Modern format, where Delirium and the Murktide decks were taking advantage of graveyard synergies alongside Dragon's Rage Channeler to stop what the Modern metagame was doing. Because look, for 1 mana you can answer something like a Primeval Titan, I should mention, for such a low cost. You don't have to double bolt anymore, so that type of removal is absolutely insane. But the flexibility of Galvanic Discharge is absolutely unmatched as well. Specifically, it's not necessarily just a bolt, especially early on with something like Guide of Souls or heck any other energy generator. You can bring it up to even higher numbers to attack higher levels of creatures and their toughnesses, or just hit something low to the ground and manage it that way. The flexibility is key, and it's a lot easier of a resource to manage. A lot of times once you get out like a Murktide or 2, you don't necessarily reliably have that Delirium, especially if your opponent isn't milling you out. How are you supposed to consistently get Delirium without a Dragon's Rage Channeler after you get like a Murktide out? There's a lot of like factors to that, but I mean, is it Murktide? And now Dimir Frogtide is a lot better at that. And Frog is a whole new discussion, honestly, because when it comes to the legacy metagame, Frog is arguably one of the best new threats printed in recent memory. And honestly, Frog is probably like a low-key like Ragavan level threat in the Modern format, where it's not necessarily like bannable, but it's absolutely insane when it lands. Like, Sure, it may not be as like must answer up front. Like Ragavan is one of those creatures where if it hits you after like turn one, like they play it on turn one, they hit you with it, they get their treasure and they steal your card. At that point, like the value is insane. The ramp on a 1-drop red creature is crazy on turn one, but Frog provides that potentiality to, I mean, before it was kind of pitching to grief and everything, but now it's being able to be still pitched to force of negation, forcible in the legacy formats, of course, but it has that option to attack in, further feed a Murktide region just by exiling cards and just draw cards. Like that's my whole rant on the Frog itself. Psychic Frog is still an insane card in the energy world, in the One Ring world. But let's just like take a quick second in this part of the video here to go into the percentages of MTG Goldfish to break down what is actually going on in the metagame. Because be honest with me, what is really going on when it comes to like casting cost and recency of these cards? Like, okay, again, the One Ring at 45%. Flage Titan of Fire's Fury, like who knew Lightning Helix on a recurable body was better than like Croxa? And I mean, let me know. I still think Uro is like miles better than this card, but some people are actually trying to convince me that Flage is better than Uro. I think that might be a blazing hot take. Consign of Memory, just arguably one of the best sideboard cards to come out of like recent memory, especially if you're going to like hyper boost the colorless decks of Eldrazi and Affinity. Consign of Memory is absolutely insane, and especially as a sideboard option to stop like triggered abilities. There's so many triggered abilities, it stops like the Storm decks as well. Consign, 10 out of 10 sideboard card, a great option out of Modern Horizons 3. Galvanic Discharge, again, just being able to like deal damage to a creature or a planeswalker, that's very relevant in this metagame right now with Rals, and you still have like some insect planeswalkers running around, but Galvanic Discharge just being able to do that. Gigantha just being the de facto like free commander that exists in Modern. And yes, it really is a commander, because the Companion Zone, let's be honest, is largely part of the unsuccessful commanderification of the constructed formats. Gigantha being the de facto, I mean, this goes into the energy decks, this goes into the Storm decks, this goes into, heck, the 5-color Domain Zoo decks. Just insane. Orcish Bowmaster is just being that de facto answer to the One Ring. Orcish Bowmaster just primarily being in black decks. If you're not a black deck, you can't play it. Otherwise, this card would probably be the second most played card in the Modern format, because the One Ring, remembering, only gives you protection for that one turn. You draw one card for free, and then after that, any other card, the Orcish Bowmaster is just going to punish you even further for that. Surgical Extraction, the reason I kind of, wanted to mention Legacy here is that Surgical Extraction for the longest time has been like one of the most played spells in the Legacy format because of the nature of the graveyard strategies in there. But Surgical Extraction being able to be taken advantage of with like the Dimir decks and the Mardu decks is like kind of insane. Right? Like Surgical Extraction was in Modern like a mill playable card. Like only the mill decks played it. Heck, there was a time when like Phoenix was running it for the mirror back when Faithless Looting was a thing. But Surgical Extraction being one of the top 10 playable cards in the format like really gives me a mental note of the shift in the Modern format. Like this is what feels like the closest thing to an Eternal format that we've had in Modern for a while. An Eternal format, that's not what Modern is by definition. Eternal has all cards as part of its legal pool, whereas, we just have the quote-unquote Modern card frame. Fatal Push, not surprising, one of the best removal spells ever printed, really just defined an era in terms of shifting the playability of like Tarmogoyf. Force of Negation, again, another shift towards what I feel like is a legacy card, like very much a play on Force of Will, Force of Negation, free counter spells, free spells, of course. And Damping Sphere, this is for all the Eldrazi decks. Let's be honest, it's for the decks trying to cheat out big things by playing their soul lands. Of course, we have like the Through the Breach decks that you could use this to stop as well. This is for the Eldrazi decks. But it's really crazy to see the top cards overall be like a complete shift. I mean, like, look, this is, at the end of the day, like this One Ring right here is, again, out of a recent set, Lord of the Rings, Modern Horizons 3, Modern Horizons 3, Modern Horizons 3, Companions by themselves, the companion mechanic, Lord of the Rings, Surgical Extraction being one of the most powerful cards ever printed, just being Phyrexian mana, okay? Fatal Push, an era-defining card. Like Fatal Push like deserves to be like one of the like top 50 Magic cards of all time. Force Negation, a free spell. Damping Sphere to stop the Eldrazi. Lightning Bolt, all-time classic. Sun Cleanser, top sideboard card right now to stop the energy decks. Amped Raptor being in energy. Guide of Souls and energy payoff. Ocelot Pride, part of the energy decks as well. Like, it's crazy to me. It's like, it's Modern Horizons cards, free spells, or energy. That's modern. That's modern right now. Like, there is no such thing almost as a standard card being played right now outside of maybe like Fatal Push and Damping Sphere. Like, nothing else. Okay, Giganta doesn't count. Giganta was printed in a standard legal set, but we know why it's powerful. It's the companion. But when we pop down to like the top spells in the modern format, it really goes to show you the efficiency required in the format as well. I think this is another sign of like the power of modern right now. I mean, Static Prison being an energy payoff, this is a spell. Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, Damping Sphere, again stopping the Eldrazi decks. Force Negation being a free spell. Fatal Push, Surgical Extraction being a free spell one as well. Discharge, Consign, and then again, the One Ring, the single most powerful artifact printed in recent memory. Honestly, like, yeah, most powerful artifact of all time, probably not. Definitely in the top 20, arguably in the top 10, but again, very, very powerful artifact in that sense. And look at the top creatures. Like, the fact that Sun Cleanser is at number 4 is insane because Sun Cleanser is a sideboard card. This card's also insane because, yeah, it doesn't get Galvanic Discharge off the bat. It's a 4 toughness. You can't just play like Galvanic Discharge into the ether and just kind of kill this or whatever. Not that you really can, because like, yeah, when it enters the battlefield you get a trigger on top of it, so if you have the energy then you can kill it in response, but then like you lose all your energy anyway. So if you have no energy, Sun Cleanser comes down, you can't hold up Galvanic and kill it then. Like, you're just not going to be able to add energy at that point. So Sun Cleanser, absolutely insane. Amped Raptor, Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, a Johnny Wild and the Cattle, like literally, like, these are all the same decks. 5, 6, 7, 8 is all part of the same deck. Obsidian Charma is being played in the sideboard just to stop like the colorless lands. Like, it's essentially like a better Damping Sphere for the decks that can ramp it out. Like, these 4 cards are the same deck being played as plays. It's just a 4-0. I just took that in. It's just being played as 4s. There's nothing bringing the percentage of this down, which I absolutely love. Orcish Bowmaster is almost exclusively a playset. Giganta solidly as a 1 because it is only being played as a companion. It absolutely blows my mind where modern is at right now. And it just really leads to that discussion, for me anyway, is energy at the point of being banned, or is this the new status quo? Like, what is the way that, you know, Wizards of the Coast would want us to solve this format? Because at the end of the day, they're going to rely on stats. They're going to push us to maybe look at some of the other tools that we have. What are the tools that we have outside of Sun Cleanser to stop the like energy menace at this point? Is energy actually that much of a problem? Is it these storm decks that are a problem as well? Because a lot of people will tell you, if you want to beat the energy decks, you should be playing the combo decks, which is again why Breach and the Ruby Storm decks are around. I mean, honestly, shout out to the Storm deck for actually returning. Modern Storm hasn't been a thing for so long. This is very much a different iteration from the Is It Storm decks that we've seen of old, but again, Storm nonetheless in terms of payoff especially. And through the Breach having a comeback as well, the Eldrazi players are continuing to eat, and a lot of the modern decks that we know and love still have playability. Merfolk still has some placements in it. My beloved Dimir Mill still has work to do in the format as well, especially in one where Surgical Extraction still is seeing a lot of play and a lot of use. But it really goes to show, what does it mean to you at this point to be a modern player? Are we, I mean, again, we are past the point of being Modern Horizons block constructed, but are we in a place where you could play a deck and still have it be viable? Because I've talked about it before, where at a local level, like, a lot of these like stats don't necessarily matter. Like, yeah, the One Ring is playable, but you can play other decks that beat the One Ring decks that aren't playing the One Ring. You could play your Eldrazi deck. Like, the E-Tron players are probably ecstatic that they have these new cards that they have access to and can kind of compete and everything. I mean, take a look at the metagame. Looking at the top 10 decks, Boros Energy, Mardu Energy, Dimir Murktide with Psychic Frog, and Orcish Bowmasters, of course, Jeskai Control being a control energy deck. Through the Breach, Ruby Storm, I would classify Through the Breach as kind of like combo big mana and Amulet Titan as well. Ruby Storm is combo E-Tron. Eldrazi ramp being like functionally E-Tron, just slightly different. Domain Zoo being, you know, the Domain Zoo, because look, the combination of the giant pterodactyl and and Leyline of the Guild Pact. That is just one of the most threatening turn 2 just opening plays of Modern. Goryo's Vengeance just providing, like, again, the fear of an early threat. Tron just having the One Ring as well and big threats. Living End being a combo deck that just absolutely ends the game and just having natural board wipes. Mono Black mid-range, as mentioned, arguably being better without the One Ring. And Merfolk, shout out to Nikachu and all of his fandom for actually bringing Merfolk up here. I mean, like, again, a lot of these decks, even I'm seeing as a mill player, being weak to mill or mill being playable into them. Shout out to Merfolk again for being up there, because the fish lovers, they'll always come through, and they're kind of the representation of that question I was asking of, like, what it means to be a Modern player. Because Merfolk kind of felt like for a very long time, like, yeah, the spikes will play it, but it felt like that local FNM hero type of deck. And to see it being a top 15 deck, or like a top deck right now, really goes to show that in a lot of ways, outside of like the big tournaments and the big challenges, like, you can go to these leagues, your Modern locals and everything, and still succeed with a lot of these decks, because it's not just about playing the One Ring or the energy packages. Those cards have weaknesses. They have play around them. Yes, they prevent you from playing in many ways. Like, people will argue Grief stopped you from playing the game at all, whereas the One Ring stops you from finishing the game because it ends up being like a comeback piece. But ultimately speaking, these decks are all beatable. They all have answers to them, and we see it in the sideboard cards being played, in terms of the top cards being played in Modern. But again, I've rambled on for a bit. Just wanted to do a quick highlight of the Modern metagame right now, especially to see where it is. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think as a Modern player. I'm honestly, like, relatively excited to be playing Modern right now. There's a lot of testing that I want to do going into this. I've been playing a lot of One Piece TCG because of the new meta over there, and playing a ton of Pauper as well, seeing how we're not really going to be getting any changes anytime soon. But definitely going to be seeing some Modern content coming soon. Leave a like on the video. Leave a comment down below again on all of your thoughts on Modern. And happy spellcasting.